My name is Matvey. I'm the technical director at the company which deals with the hardware systems, acronym systems. Well, actually, maybe not quite on the topic. I will tell you today why most of the mesh networks blockchain do not work or deceive us. So far, new internet is it rare? Well, it's buckling. Actually, I will not share only my experience, since most of my story from the pitch is coming from research and clippings from the reports of my team that deals with mesh networks. Unfortunately, today only one of them is here. This person with Boris. Thank you, Boris. Imagine, even in the distant future, some 66 satellites, let's call them Iridium, function as a single mesh network with wireless connection between satellites. When they call between these satellites, the satellite phone goes from one to the other, transferring to each other, functioning as a mesh network within one constellation without the need for interaction with the Earth and the stations on the ground. This provides shorter travel path. Naturally, the economy of traffic, data economy, reduces the delay in conversation, and also allows the constellation to function much less than number of Earth stations than required for traditional 66 satellites. It sounds like a cyberpunk, but in fact it is, and it was launched already in 2003. In 1962, a very clever guy named Paul Bourne prepared a report on the distributed computer network, and he suggested using a decentralized system of interconnected computers, in which they are all equal, which, even with the destruction of its part, could be restored and will work. It does not determine us or anything, and this is another 7 years before the first transfer, the first connection between the two nodes of the internet network. In the 1970s, when the first computers were decreasing, for the first time they began to develop a routing between wireless networks. In the 70s, when only the first data transmission was carried out a year ago, the widespread use of wireless networks began in the 19th and was directly called MANET. In parallel, the US Department of Defense funded NASA and a number of other private companies to develop and create an interplanetary internet network, and this was in the 19th. And in 2003, for the first time, articles on network resistant to tearing, or as they are called in the region, delay tolerant network (DTN), were published for the first time. But what exactly is a mesh network? We'll go back a bit. Mesh network is a kind of association of devices, computers, communication transmitters, not according to the traditional methodology, clients and access point, but an association in which the signal traffic is routed between computers directly without the participation of any centralized server. The advantages of this technology are very obvious. We use conventional networks, then when we exit the central node, we lose contact with the whole world and are part of the network. If life in the topology goes one point, then we continue to function and reconstruct on the topology and communication base. There are different types of mesh networks. One of them is the CGDNS, on which we worked on the hackathon. It's a specific routing protocol. And most mesh networks are secure, and this is their main advantage. Since all the traffic inside these networks is encrypted according to the standard protocol of private public keys. So, only one person will see what passes to the second person, and only the second person can decode it. Therefore, we can easily transfer through other people's hotspots their data packets. A little about the application. In fact, mesh networks have been used for a long time. One of the application cases is a communication in regions with undeveloped infrastructure. Now you see Catalonia on the map, actually, and the rural area of Catalonia in 2004. The guys, enthusiasts, launched a network of Goofy, as it's called. As a response to the and accessibility of their broadband signal and for the fact that the providers did not want to go there. And now they have about 30,000 peer-to-peer connections nodes, and of course there are still not providers there. The second variant of case where it's used is communication in large corporate environments. This is the main problem of bottleneck solution. Just wireless networks designed for large corporate environments have one drawback. Since we build them according to the topology of the star, the bandwidth. So if we do this via the mesh network, we will get the opportunity not to receive a broadband signal. And the traffic will be managed evenly among all nodes. One of the cases which was made back in 2006 has written a link to mass events. This in 2006 was at the music festival Strawberry Fair. The guys launched the mesh network which provided access to the internet at the festival for more than 80,000 people. Of course, the most widespread use now is naturally for military purposes, and Americans use it to navigate in very hard to reach areas, such as deserts or countries such as Iran and Iraq, and mostly for field operations. But an interesting case, the last one that can be used is power industry. Since now on the final nodes all that matters collect information about the consumed electricity. If they transmit the testimony to each other, then the energy will get rid of the people necessary for themselves in the form of maintains personal and controlling bodies. And in principle you can come up with a consensus system. When directly software born, it will be impossible to deceive. But what do we now offer developers of mesh networks? Let's start with the first, is Skycoin. Skycoin is one of the biggest in capitalization. They claim, as we found, the mesh network which actually looks like one of the most adequate, at least looked at the last moment. They have an interesting mechanism for consensus, which they themselves came up with. And it consists in the fact that the network reaches consensus, sends out the packages several times within the same block. Those, all the nodes that distributed the internet must synchronize themselves. They have a lot of mathematical papers and common, so I can tell everything that they came up with is very difficult, and I left a QR code with the reference to the research Alexander Ivanov wrote. But what is their main problem? One day, when it became known that paid money to marketers who were embarrassed by hundreds of thousands of Skycoins, and marketers constantly dumped the course and peeled it down, did the guys suggest what to do? Here is a direct quote. They decided that it's normal to use blacklisting and censorship in the decentralized internet. Actually, cancel transactions. Do not let them conduct it to anyone who wants to do it. Is it normal? Questionable. The next project is a Smart Mesh. Smart Mesh does not offer itself initially as a decentralized internet for the whole world. They say that this is an Internet of Things protocol based on the blockchain, which will allow you to connect smartphones, any built-in equipment, other devices to each other without the help of the internet. Token, of course, ERC20, which will be used to purchase goods and services of the Smart Mesh network as well as to encourage the holders of the nodes. On the other hand, as the project states, the goal of the platform development is the creation of a global ecosystem that will allow exchanging data in parallel with the internet or in its absence. To this end, developers are also starting to realize the potential of the Internet of Things and expand its application. As a basis, they take smartphones accompanying all other mobile devices as well as additional equipment that can interact within the same network. The most interesting thing is that they say the biggest problem is the user's intensification to do it. But in their white paper, only one paragraph is devoted to this, about 4 sentences of the text. They tell us, as usual, about microtransactions, the high bandwidth of the network, which we doubt so far. A project that looks just as good at first glance as the Right Mesh project. The project Right Mesh, perhaps from people is the only project that dealt with mesh and before they engaged in blockchain. These guys really organized internal local networks in Africa, in other hard to reach regions, so that people could receive information, for example, about the freedom of hospitals or some kind of humanitarian supplies in Africa. And they do not position themselves that they will present us as a full-fledged decentralized internet. But what they immediately read on the site introduces a little in the misunderstanding of what is happening. For example, the third point and the fourth. Patenting is natural in the Ethereum network. We are very strange about patenting in the network of networks, because it's hard to do an open source technology and also to patent it. And the use of the ERC20 token here creates a very big problem in the form of saying that it's just that Ether is not suitable for implementing the network, and they will do it on the right network. And we have three tokens: Ethereum token, Raiden token, which also serves as a fuel for transactions inside the network, as well as the ERC20 token. But I had to tell you, that's not all. I forgot about Smart Mesh. To say that they have certain delegates who are elected for 4 years, and they decide what networks are correct, which nodes are correct, and which are wrong. 4 years. I think this is a very long time for some kind of arbitration and general arbitration and management decisions. Block Mesh. Block Mesh is truly a unique project that the ICO recently assembled, but their paper is just like an advertising list. Here are two main slogans and that they give directly from the site. The first one is that the internet will be absolutely free, and the second one is that they make a wallet to provide amazing freedom for unbanked people, as usual, and connect them naturally without any single costs, without common problems, and will all be absolutely free. But by studying the protocols of consensus deeper, especially those that can be applied to mesh networks, one thing I can say is that once I was summed up by Andrei Sobol, it is that socialism and communism do not work even in the network of mesh networks. Actually, it's very hard to impersonate users without taking other users to pay for their services. And what about technology in general in principle? We looked at the blockchain of mesh network. What will developers of mesh networks tell us? The first protocol we deal with was the CGDNS protocol. It's named after the developer who invited it. In fact, these are his initials. The project is not bad, but his main problem is that the developers themselves do not understand that they do not work. It perfectly suits as an overlay of the internet, but is absolutely unsuitable for building completely decentralized networks. Here are the three main bugs that they claim about themselves. Let's call it also a white paper, and which they do not know how to solve. The first bug is a black hole. As they themselves call, we do not understand what is happening in it. The principle of it is that it just, if you take three ABC points and are connected to one mesh island, you can reach from point A to point C through point B. But you cannot reach point B for some reason. Why this does not work, the developers do not know the answer. The second problem is basic. There is a horizon problem, the horizon bug, but they base it on the fact that this is not a bug but a feature. The essence of the bug is that the limitation of the number of hops that a packet can pass through in order to reach the recipient is 6. In practice, he is at 8. But it's very difficult to imagine how without the existing internet I will send a package from Kiev to Odessa without participation, with less than 8 hops proper. And the last one is a secret center, in which they too can now figure out when you receive data packets that were not intended for you. The second protocol, which looks more realistic, more interesting, and really works on a small scale, is Batman. So, Batman protocol itself is still being developed by the free fund community in Germany as a replacement for some old protocols. The main feature of Batman was the decentralization of information in the best route on the network. So, no node could in principle own any data. Each node stored information only about the direction from which the data comes in, and also in which they are sent. Thus, the nodes transmitted packets to each other over dynamically created routes. They use the classical elements of the routing protocol. They find other Batman nodes and determine the shortest path from the sender to the recipient itself. Each node regularly sends broadcast messages. Hello everyone, I'm here. Informing the neighbors about the existence in this way. Neighbors transmit this information to the neighbors and so on. Each node thus receives information. But Batman also has a problem and the advantage that on one hand it can be used not only in wireless networks but also in cable networks such as the internet. And Batman does not attempt to determine the whole route, but only the first step of the package. The second in the right direction. Data is sent to all neighboring directions when they are obtained, so the fastest is the shortest way. But the problem we faced when using it is the lack of overlays over the existing internet. They can exist only locally, and the second is that one of our islands can withstand only 300 nodes. Fuzzy mesh islands break up. It is difficult to organize a worldwide internet around the entire planet with only 300 nodes. Library mesh. Library mesh perhaps is already an interesting concept. This is not so much a routing protocol as a software for routers based on the separation of network levels. And allows you to create mesh networks in two layers, and they call it cloud and network. At the ground level, imagine that you have a home. I suggest using the Batman protocol and then routing the data with the DMX protocol, actually the main BMX advantage. But unfortunately, on the BMX protocol so far studies have stopped and we are moving on, so I cannot tell about BMX and all the advantages. Actually, unfortunately, when you look at the attempts of the blockchain developers to create the internet, it is like creating an internet without the internet. As if this guide is how to make a radio receiver out of television set with a broken picture tube. We came up with a protocol, implemented it, but then, well, you need to transfer information somehow to another continent. No channel, no transfer. And without this, all these P2P mesh networks are a bunch of locals like a university hostel of a decade ago. Well, all pornography is common and each is an admin. Enthusiasts are many, but unfortunately money and brains are still not enough, so it is necessary to bow to providers for the time being, and the very idea turns out into creation of a vacuum cleaner with our own hands. But ahead of us is the research of this list of the routing protocol and wireless connections, so hope that after all we will be able to achieve that local, worldwide wireless wire networks will be public spaces like streets, parks, forests and the sea remains. Thank you. Alright, can I ask you a question? Yes, you can. Come on, raise your hands if you have questions. Yes, well. And what are you doing? Thank you, Matvey. I do everything. And somehow the problem is solved. Or there's such a problem in general, the interception of traffic here and mesh networks. No difference. I thought that they are encrypted. You can use my traffic. No, well, for example, I raised my Ether wallets somewhere and as it were, someone redirected somewhere in the middle, somewhere on my own. Look, the problem is that you can redirect as much as you like. The most that you get, you'll just lose it. Your package will not reach the recipient. But directly in the package, no one will ever know. Well, no, finds out if he applies himself to the fact that they'll begin to decipher them. And since the packets are very small, even sending your own transaction, it will be several data packets. It is not possible in practice to determine where what data is and what needs to be decrypted directly. Thank you. In continuation of this, I have a question. Do I understand correctly that there's an onion structure? What do I have if I pass, for example, a package in 6 steps? Here, then I will need to encrypt. I need to first find out the route, how I will get there, then encrypt. Well, this is to communicate, to find out. Not at all. No, in all mesh networks. In all the different protocols in different ways. For example, there are in CGDNS. They are trying to learn ahead of the route about what and how to achieve. Batman also sends out hello packets and tries to come up. For example, there are technologies that are used for the military with delayed networks, and then it works on a format of warehouse. Imagine that there are 4 points A, B, C, and D. How that transferred? The point knows that they should be sent to the nearest neighbors. It sends them around the constellation to the point B, for example, and point B, the cargo is unloaded to the warehouse. Point B says, I want to pass them on. They say, okay, to the point C. The point C transmits from point 6 and transfer to point C, and point C says this, they say down, but there is no next point, and actually this load lies in the warehouse until the road is built. But for example, in CGNS, yes, you need to know the way forward. And how do we know that the package has reached? It runs out to the recipient. He sends back the same way, and this is he sends package that he received it along the same path. In CGDNS, yes, and S4. Well, no, actually, look, send packets back only in cases where we want users to initiate. In fact, in practice, but to drop the garbage which you are saying here in the warehouse in is package. How do we know that this package is obtained and can already be validated that is not necessary to store it? Look, listen to Boris. He did this research. Such a thing as I had to find out which private key to encrypt. That is, you really have basically the nation, and this site is public key is mesh network. So it's like an IP address, something like that. But actually, you have IPv6 used in CGDNS. Actually, is just that worked with him the most, so I can tell about him most of all. In practice, I was raised as with Batman, but with Batman less because it turned out that 300 nodes would not hold. Actually, you turn if the site is just a public key or an IPv6 address. When, by the way, they did not investigate this question. When will it be clear when IPv4 dies or never dies? Now we'll see this and then we'll find out. 2 questions. The first one, it first yes or not present, and then the second. I correctly understand the state of the topic, which is now not there are no working consensus protocol for mesh networks, but also the construction of mesh networks there on the scale of the continent is not yet an essentially solved problem. On the first part of the question, I answer yes. This is the first question, not about blockchain. Now, the first part of the question is connected with blockchain and mesh networks. Yes, indeed, we have not seen a single consensus that has worked until the end, or a fairly good description of the concept of how this should work in practice, with the introduction, economic indicators, where the money comes from, and the domestic economy. Even they do not work consensually, do not know how to check traffic. Perhaps it's like spam-based word. On the second question part of the question is whether it's possible to construct a continental mesh network. I cannot give you an exact answer because this what lies ahead. This is the first. And the second, after all, these technologies are likely to exist, but they are not available in public because they are used for military purposes mostly. Just like with the 66 satellite of Iridium. They have been worked since 2003 in the mesh network, and we do not know until the end of all these subtitles of the protocol they are used. But it is these 66 with satellites on Earth, they are not enough to make space satellite communications. Well, the question about routing was stopping. I can of course now wipe the nonsense, but what prevents me from marrying a mesh protocol with traditional routing protocols in a large adult Ethernet type BGP and so on? Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, people are trying not to build new crutches. The basic protocols of routing on the internet are associated with a sufficiently large crutch, and their main crutch is that there are not even providers by such points as IXP Internet Exchange Point. They have to keep the vast base of routes connected to this. These crutches, I agree 100% that they are crutches, but they have a big advantage. They work. Is it yes? Is it work? This work? And by reinvent the bicycle, then which will also be crutches. But in fact, there is. And by the way, Boris will answer. Simply, then it will be necessary to store all these bases in an industrialized manner, and if will all of you to use the current ones, then the road will be long, very long for you. If now you can get into Google in one click, then using this technology in mesh networks, you will wait there. Well, not for ages, but for about 5 minutes you just need to update the page. I think you will never enjoy it. Yes, I still ask. Thanks, by the way. That was very interesting. I look at the site, here are the American consensus. I remember you told about Gotena. They had the site imsu.com. That's where they show coverage, and their America just does not seem to be behind network nodes. Well, you can think of it as if they were alright. It's my first question. I understand that is a hardware solution. Yes, well, okay. Let's there be a two-sided question. And secondly, I'm curious, if you did not look, did not study, I have such a clear feeling that you need to immediately dig into the economic side of the question, right? Did anyone conduct a study? Well, we intuitively understand that through the monetization, through the DNS, or even there are some much small stories, we will not launch any global network. Yes, in any case, there will be a need for monetization and adult series which can there plus minus complete there which the API current. Yes, well, I was wondering whether you were looking at any studies on the economy of this issue. How much we need, what kind of overhead or overhead we need. For example, there should be to make it interesting so that people there would be more interested in keeping all these bulbous nodes and bothering in exchange in order to get what we want. Look, we'll start this first. It's about Gotena. Actually, Gotena, again, it does not work as a full-scale mesh network of decentralized coverage. It works like an overlay. It tries to find the nearest node in order to send traffic to the internet. And in fact, taking into account the fact that densely populated places, it presses up to 3 kilometers. It searches for 2, 3, 4, 5, and it already has an internet connection. And this, how would it? Well, not an invention fact as it is, and this allows it to function without problems even on any protocol. The second is like a protocol that's not used, it's closed source. You cannot look inside, unfortunately, therefore, yes, your advice. I have not written to the developers that they had something to give, but I think I will write and will be seen, because that will be open something. The second question, in fact, we would like to find the studies here in the white paper in the mesh network blockchain, because perhaps there are main people who are interested in understanding, and the incentive should work in order to make us greedy users. Do everything yourself. Listen, after all, we will understand. Yes, this is actually the whole problem, and some offer cost-free, others center transactions, and the internet is shorter. It does not yet provide understanding. We also thought that we will find the answers to these questions there, but now most of the more or less or near performance projects that they are working do not give the answer to the question. There is another interesting project, Altair, but it's sold by only two dude enthusiasts. In general, they have very good lecture on YouTube, 2 hour for 2 hour long, for about mesh network in general. But again, they are building their project on the Ethereum, where the incentive will be. So no, I think its project works, but they're also not necessary. You can do everything yourself. You can without glance and so on. But their problem is that they are building completely correct mesh network, but their concept will not work because they are on the Ethereum, and B, for all traffic you have to pay for any. This is, if you assume we're going to some depressing region and there is a bunch of smartphones already, for example Zanzibar, everyone had smartphones, but the internet is very bad, although there is 4G, and people, in order to take advantage of decentralized internet, it is necessary to somehow buy the Ether, buy ERC20 token, and only if there are nodes nearby, pay for it and start using it. The main problem is that first, he needs to buy them, and second, he needs the internet for this to buy and transfer this. Well, how to open the channel and start using it? And MetaMask install? Yes, in Africa. Download the extra 100 meters. Yes, actually, there is a problem. From the point of view of technical implementation, this will work. You will find without any problems. The second side of coin, directly, why I greedy, we call in the miner, it the miner. I do not know. We need to come up with some meaning for them. So it's written on your shirt, but it's not about those yet. This is why I will be interested in putting this node. Actually, I can cover it. There is enough money to cover the half of the Kiev region. And the fact that there is at least one person in the whole Kiev region who will use the service of this network, and their mission is limited. This is all is released, and so long as the client does not exist, I will not earn anything. I'm not interested in explaining the infrastructure, though here it is necessary to make some hybrid approach to the fact that on the one hand it's like socialism, semi-socialism is a definite link to determine the latitude of the channel. For example, 10% of the capacity of a certain route is free in order to establish a connection, in order for there to be completely actions there, to get some news you could, to correspond in a telegraph and so on. To use this is useful for the network to understand the bits of the channel, to understand what kind of organization, what to rent, and the rest should be paid. Because the approach is that when everything is completely paid and everything is completely free, it will not work. By the way, what is perceived under the node? Tower? Well, under the node, any router. What before doesn't usually give out much. What difference? The main task is to initiate do any, at least usual, to start using. Because to need in mesh network, it is possible and a number of usual routes. This is not a problem. To take any router, install OpenWarmFare with the support packages related to mesh networks, and then you need. But if you want it naturally, if you correctly initiate, tell people that you make money on it, so that this economy will work, of course, but this will not be our problem then. We must implement the protocol, or at least come up with a protocol. People will do everything themselves, if it's profitable. Our own hardware company will make a router that will give out 20 kilometers to make money. Do you understand? Everything. And Bitmail will think up the router and everyone else. And on greed will do good to the whole world. Any more questions for Matvey?
Да, уже можно на самом деле аплодировать.
I uploaded prepared. Yes, you can actually applaud. Thank you very much, Matvey.
Все, ты готовился.